up to the head side, then down to the rump. Now obviously this is the spinal column and such coming through here. And the structure is exactly the same on a pig as what we're going to get on a cow. So we do have the tenderloin that's going in here. Now if this was a cow, we would take it and we would make some cuts on it that would give us our T-bone steaks and such. But we're getting the rib bone a little bit and little cuts coming off of the tenderloin, which is here. I did bring the steel this week. I did talk quite a bit last week about using a stone for sharpening our knives and such, and hadn't brought a steel with me. I usually use the stones for sharpening regularly, but I will use the steel for honing. Most commonly, they make these things at the wrong size because you want to be able to come down on the steel as you're working with it. So notice that I've put a cloth over my hand. You can customize these at home if you have an old cutting board. Just take a saw to it and cut out a chunk and you can make a nice big safety on it so you're not going to hit yourself, but it's quite common that you get a lot of injuries when you're trying to use a steel to sharpen your knives. And you're not so much sharpening them, but just simply honing them. So I normally will just cover up my hand when I'm working with it, and I pretty much, same as using a stone, it's going to be the type of knife that I'm using that's going to dictate how I'm going to use the steel and how close or what angle I'm actually using the knife up against the steel at. For this one here, I'm taking a little bit thin. I was using a global, which is a much thinner knife than that. I would even be much tighter with it. I don't know if you can see that angle. But almost coming right down along the steel where it's almost going to be rubbing up against the entire blade. Some people will do it this way, which is fine, but you can see that I'm not sharpening the whole blade when I'm doing that. That's why we have to repeatedly or regularly use our stones to make sure we're treating the whole blade. Other chefs are going to bring it down like this, and if you get really good, you're going to be sharpening on the upside and on the downside. You do see people get very, very quick at it over a long period of time and such, but that's something that takes a lot of practice. When I was first learning, you do like this, so that it's not going towards you. Most of the injuries in the first week of culinary school are guys trying to show off to female culinary students. Or you can also take this route as well if need be until you become more comfortable with the motion. Good steels, I'm not sure how tired this one is. This one's tired. Should be magnetic. This one's not picking anything up. Yeah, there's a little bit of pull there, it's not much. There we go. Yeah, it wants to pick it up. It wanted to. It's thinking of it. There we go. And the reason that they're magnetic is because when we're working it, we're actually driving off some metal filings. And as those filings build up, one thing you do not do is what I just did. And you can see that I got all this little bit of gray bit and such. That's little bits of the steel, and that's little bits of my knife. And it's just like on sandpaper. That's the grit that you want to build up that's actually going to be honing your knife for you. That's what's going to be doing all the work. So you don't want to wipe that off of your steel. You do want to wipe it off of the knife because you don't want that getting into your food and such. That's how the steel works. We're going to get rid of that because of metal filings. All right. How many people buy pork in the grocery store? Quite a few. How much does a tenderloin cost these days?
For $3 something a pound.
$3 something a pound, that's right. Which means you're running about $6 on a pork tenderloin. The tenderloin is the first thing that we remove. Now when we're taking meat cuts out of larger cuts of animals and such, or like what we're doing here, it's pretty easy to do. Everything's actually pretty prevalent. You can see your rack of ribs. You can see where your tenderloin's parked in here. And it's nestled in up against bones. So you cut down to the bones and take them out. Take the meat out, leaving the bones behind. And get it as close to the bone as you can. Obviously I'm using a boning knife. Gives me good contact. And you have to use it a little bit differently than if you were working with your vegetables and such. Some connective tissue. It's just a matter of following it along. one of the main reasons that our meat is so expensive is the amount of processing that has to go through. You have to pay people to do all the work for you. And what we're doing here today is actually going to show you a way of saving an awful lot of money. These aren't cuts that you're going to be able to get. The larger cut like this loin, you're not going to be able to get at the grocery store. They're in the business of making lots of money. And so they actually do most of the processing themselves. A fair bit of connective tissue coming out with it. Alright. There's $6. We still have to clean that up a little bit. How much is a rack of ribs?
I spend $20 in Montana's for a rack of back ribs.
Fair enough, yeah. You're almost about $10 for a rack of ribs nowadays, especially for a full one like this. There is a difference in the ribs whether you get the sides or the backs, yes. Well, with this one here, we end up with a fair bit of connective tissue. Here, down towards the rump, because we're coming off just above the ham here, and you can see that we have a number of different muscle groups coming together. And actually, at this end here, I think there's a total of 12 different muscle groups that come together. So that tends to be a rather tougher, chewier piece of meat. And here too, coming up into the shoulder, we do have the bone coming up here for the collarbone, what would technically be a collarbone on us. And then it's getting into all these different cuts of meats that are coming together to form the shoulder as well. So you can see grain of meat coming across here, we've got grain of meat coming across here, and that's going to get a little bit tough as well. So that's going to allow us to take out about here and here, leaving us with a nice loin inside, which I'll just start doing. And basically just come in along the spine bones that are coming up. Just work your way around them. Now, one thing that's different about pork bones versus beef bones is we don't work with the spine meat so much for making soups and stocks. You can, but with pork and such, it tends to make a very, very muddy kind of stock. It's a little bit grayer, gets quite cloudy, and the reason chefs are paid so much is because we don't like our stocks to look like that. We want it to be nice and fancy and stay very nice and clear for us. So you can use the bones if you choose to. Always use the bones from the legs though. If you're going to be making a soup or something, want to make a stock, you do not want to use your spine bones. You can, but I advise not to, just simply because any situations where we're having mad cow, heaven forbid we ever get a mad pig, a lot of those diseases are originating from consuming spinal column and brain as well. The whole mad cow thing is actually a disease that was first discovered in humans, not in the bovine species. And it showed up in a group of peoples that were living in the South Pacific. And the reason that it was showing up was because they were actually practicing cannibalism. And whenever a species consumes its own, and you're consuming spinal column, or any of the nervous system, you run a risk of getting Jacobs disease, which is basically the strain of mad cow disease that we went through here a few years ago. So all I'm doing is cutting along the bones. It goes a lot faster if you're not talking, actually. Okay, so I got a rack of ribs in here, which will run about $10. We've got a good shoulder roast. I'm going to have a good back roast here. This one up here, if you're going to pay for a pork roast that big, how much would you pay probably? You're probably going to be paying about $25 for it. And we got one of them at each end, so we're at $50 there. We're at $50. Add another $6 on there, so we're at $56. How much are pork chops usually? No one knows? People don't eat pork? Is that why we're here today? So we can go home and actually eat pork now? I'm going to be able to get that many pork chops out of here. So 4, 8, 20 pork chops out of here as well. You're probably going to be running up around $200, maybe $250 to $3 if you were to buy this in the grocery store.
So where's my wife's favorite butt chops?
Where's your wife's? I don't know. What does your wife eat?
Butt chops. She just loves butt chops.
Come with the butt chops, and we're closer down to the butt, so we're going to be down on this end here, and you're going to be getting into this section here. If you choose to, I forgot to bring my meat saw this morning, so this could make it really colorful here shortly once I get to these bones. You can leave the bones in if you choose to, and do like a bone-in chop, which is quite tasty. If you like having a little bit of bone on your meat and such. Right down on our ribs. Just like working on a fish, coming down over the spines. No different. And depending on how you like your ribs, if you want, you can leave more meat on them, or you can cut them right down. There. You can see that we're starting to release the rib. You can buy these for $50 to $60 at Otonabee's.
That whole piece of meat, Brian?
$50 to $60, yeah. This one was $59 exactly. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, have to hire a chef. Well, that's why.
Then you're back over the $200.
Then you're back up. Oh, yeah, easily. Let me tell you. But that's where our pricing comes from, because you have to pay someone to do it, right?
Well, that's what I average. Where the side ribs is.
Side ribs, excuse me, are actually further down from where this has been cut off. We're getting down towards where the belly would be, where we're getting our bacon and such from.
So a spare rib is the side and the back all in one shot, right?
Yes. Now, it does get a little bit wonky when we get up around the shoulder here, because we do get into different bone groups and such, and it's just a matter of getting it around the bone, following the bone and cutting around it and such. Use the bones or the natural muscle lines to remove any of the cuts. And irregardless, even if you like literally butcher your cut here the first time that you work on it and such, you're still going to be ahead when it comes to actual saving money and such.
Do you do this at home?
I do, yes. Yeah, it was a little different yesterday taking my 1.5-year-old daughter to the abattoir. But they've all grown up that way. They're kind of used to it. They're used to seeing live animals, and then shortly thereafter seeing dinner. We don't always do that. It's a little bit primitive. And it's a fair bit of work for making dinner sometimes, but we do quite often if we're hosting Thanksgiving or something, we will have 20-30 people in, and we will get in live animals and take them down from the living stage, just because everyone in the family is pretty savvy with it. Those that aren't just sit inside and wait till it's all over and time to eat. And they get to do dishes for us, so that's how that one works.
It used to be that farmers butchered their own meat, but
Yes.
that doesn't happen anymore.
Doesn't happen anymore, no. A lot of that's got to obviously to do with regulations and such, which are needed for a number of reasons, obviously. Yes, and butchers